everyone. Welcome to MoveCo Live. My name is Samantha Moonsammy Gordon, your host of the show. And wow, we are in 2021. I think we all agree we are ready for a new year and for starts and new beginnings. And I'm so excited today to introduce you to our speaker today. Her name is Nereah Felix. How are you today?
I am doing wonderful. And you?
Good, thank you. I'm so happy to have you here. You're a psychotherapist. You talk about happiness. You're going to give us an inside scoop of what it's like to be a psychotherapist and, the conversations that you're having on the couch with people. And really, I really hope everyone who's listening today gets inspired and, realizes something that I loved from your website, Catharsis Therapy, is that, you don't have to do this alone and success leaves clues. I want everyone to always remember that whenever we're going through a hard time, one thing is, it's not forever. And two, you don't have to do it alone. And people like Nereah definitely help us, get through it, get through those challenging times, those peaks and troughs in our life. So I'd like to introduce her right now. I've got your bio here. So Nereah Felix is a registered psychotherapist qualifying, and she started a therapy company called Catharsis Therapy here in Ottawa, Canada's capital. And she really starts off by saying, opening up to someone you do not know is hard, but she really strives to make that as comfortable as possible. She works from an integrative, psychodynamic, emotion-focused, cognitive-behavioural perspective that is trauma-informed. She always caters her therapy to whomever she is working with in order to ensure that we are working towards the goals you would like to achieve. Nereah strives to create an environment that is warm, open, and non-judgmental. Her practice is open and inclusive and accepts any and all of your identities, whether that be religion, race, sexuality, and beliefs. So let's just start. I'd love to ask you, what's the most common concern you see in your practice?
Yeah, so that is a very good question. And I do work primarily with adults. And the top two, I would say, are anxiety, depression. Now, the most interesting part is that people's anxiety and depression derives from, different areas of their lives, but also their history with people, with experiencing life has a huge role to play in how they experience the world. And anxiety is a fear of, what will happen in the future. It's very future oriented, whether it's real or perceived. And depression is a sadness about maybe what has happened or someone's current situation. So yeah, I would say those are the top two presenting concerns. But of course, once you start, digging deeper within session, it usually becomes a lot more complex.
Absolutely. So why do you think that is, and that those are the two topics? I mean, I'm not surprised that you say that it's mental health and depression, but why do you think that is, from your opinion?
Right. Well, when I wrote that question, I didn't know how big that was going to be, but that is a big question. Why do I think that is? Well, when it comes to anxiety and depression and the ways that people experience those, if you think about life in general, for example, all the things you have to manage in a day, your health, your relationships with people, your own desires, needs, wants, wishes for what you want, we're constantly having to keep those in mind. And sometimes we are in situations that are not actually in alignment with what we want or what makes us comfortable. So in terms of anxiety itself, there are so many different variations of that. So people sometimes don't feel comfortable around people. So social anxiety derives from that, the sense of who's looking at me, who's judging me negatively. When do I get to feel like enough? Why don't I feel like enough? And then depression, that is such a, oftentimes I do believe that anxiety does take a front seat, and then the depression does kick in, because anxiety is so fight or flight, it's so energy consuming, and then depression is that flat line where your body, your mind is like, enough is enough, we're tired of fighting, and we're just going to take a long break because the energy is all gone. So why do I think that is? As people, we have so much to manage, so much to manage. And on top of what I mentioned, if we think about, finances, if you think about someone's social location in terms of the different institutions that may disempower them. So we're fighting against a lot of, personal, interpersonal, but also a lot of societal forces that may dictate what privileges we have access to, what people we run into, and how they then, shape our own narrative. So there's so much going on. Being human is pretty hard.
And thank you for bringing that up. Like that's part of the conversation of,
Mm-hmm.
unconscious bias and microaggressions and just these little things in society. So I really appreciate, because I really think this, it's come up in the surface, these conversations. I really, I've observed it a lot since, just the whole Black Lives Matter movement from, last June of 2020. And just like, I really feel a different shift in the world where maybe like things were under the surface. And I think it's still, a lot of people are still a bit shy and don't know how to articulate it, but I really appreciate that you acknowledge the humanness of, because there's so much in our society that kind of like praises like this fastness and this busyness, you know what I mean? But we don't really like take a step back to just breathe and be like, okay, like what's all this that's going on for me to still function every day and just like, work and perform in all our different roles. And, the privilege side of things is also very, very interesting. And, I think we all need to work together to be mindful of each other and the human experience and these layers that we have, like with our colleagues at work, our partners, our friendships, and just really understand that, yeah, we're all coming often from very different perspectives. And, so I'm happy that you shine the light on that. So, we talk about happiness, and I'm sure the word happiness is on the top of many people's New Year's resolutions, like get fit, get happy, like these notions, like, given what you've seen with your practice and people, the study of people, like, is it possible to truly be happy?
And then that's a really good question. Happiness is defined in many different ways. The way I define it is a sense of well-being, joy, or contentment. And as with many emotions, it has a beginning, it has an end. it can be temporary, it can come back. So I feel like as human beings, we are in a constant state of trying to get to that place. And there's so many different areas of our lives that we have to consider. So first, I believe that people's relationships with other people is such an important key. Is this person treating me well? Are my needs being met in this relationship? Are there healthy boundaries established? When I interact with this person, how do I leave feeling? Do I feel a sense of, being heard, or am I walking away frustrated or angry or hurt, or very sad or humiliated, embarrassed? So it is about, being more attuned with our relationships with others and really getting a sense of what is going on here. And is it something that I could tolerate for a long time? Because people feel all the time. Feelings come before our cognition. Like if you think of a little kid or a baby, if they're hungry, that's their need. And they're going to cry. They're going to cry because they're upset. They're like, hey, feed me. I want food. And it's that simple. But people tend to invalidate their own experiences with others. So do I have the right to feel like sad? Like, is it wrong that I'm mad at this person? So there's a lot of, self-doubt, but I think relationships focusing on that and focusing on, what's coming up for me is very important. The next aspect is self-esteem. So how do I feel about myself? Am I working hard? at this job because I feel like I have something to prove, because I feel like I'm not good enough in some way, and somehow I need to make sure that I'm staying 3 hours past, what I work, like when work ends, in order to ensure that, my supervisors and my colleagues see that I'm worthy. Or do I inherently feel stable in my sense of self? Am I confident in the decisions that I make for me? Or do I tend to put the opinions, thoughts, feelings of others ahead of my own? And how does that then shape my narrative, if it's always about the other person and never about me as an individual, as a separate individual in the world? And lastly, it's always important for people to have a sense of narcissism. And narcissistic is very different from narcissism. Narcissism is one's ability to do and achieve things in the world. So this is where, goals, and we all envision what success will look like in our worlds, whether that is, doing a certain thing with a certain job, or starting a movement, or advocating for others, or creating and doing things that really speak to our talents and our abilities. And if somebody does have access to that, that can enrich their life so much. But let's say, that the cards are stacked against them, and they never get a chance to engage in what they find meaningful and wonderful in the world, that could provide a lot of, sadness in somebody's life. So those are the 3 different categories that, happiness does kind of derive from. And I think being human is constantly tuning into, what's happening, am I okay with this? And then following through or not following through with decisions that could potentially dictate whether you're one step closer or one step further from that sense of well-being, joy, or contentment.
Well-being, joy, and contentment. I love that, and I love that you started right away with the energies of people. I always say, like, this is a perfect time of year to just like make that list. I call it like my circle. So who's in my inner circle, my primary circle, my secondary circle, and like the periphery, the third. And, these are real things, like if someone's giving you like an emotional drive-by, every time you see them, like, it's okay to, especially if it comes from like close family or friends, sometimes we feel guilty, but like, you have to listen to yourselves. And I love that you brought up the primalness of a child, because you're right. They really remind us and cue us too of, the basics. And we often forget that as adults, or think we need to push through this. I love the quote from Oprah that says, surround yourself with people that will lift you higher. Like, it might sound, unattainable for some, but like, if you really think about that, like, you have the power within yourself to make all of those choices. Yes, you might not be able to control all your coworkers and all of that, but you could change your job. Can you change your immediate family? Not necessarily, but friends can be your family. Like, there's so many things in life. And I would say that, like, reclaiming that and having that posture when it comes to happiness, and once again, when you talked about the narcissism and just like the goals, I think that was really important too. Like, I learned something there too, in terms of a way that you frame that. So thank you so much. Humanness. I mean, you're talking a lot about the human experience right now. What, in your opinion, is the hardest part of being human?
I think the hardest part about being human is so there are 2 different things. First is being understood. And the second is being vulnerable. So the first part, being understood, I often run into people in my practice who are experiencing a certain thing, and they feel such shame, because when they try to open up to somebody else about it, they feel shut down. The other person doesn't make room for their experience. And that could be so harmful, because as human beings, we're not all going to have the same experience. We're not. And some of us may react certain ways to certain situations that maybe somebody else wouldn't. But that doesn't mean that our own experience is invalid. Like, there's no one way to be or to interact. You know, one of the things I run into the most is, for example, people who don't like their families. And that is such a real experience. And sometimes you will find people who judge and say, well, you're supposed to love your family. You're supposed to, you know, be okay with them. You're supposed to do this. You're supposed to feel that. But that's not entirely true. Everybody has their own history, belief system, experiences with family members that may sometimes, it may be very, very difficult to find that love. And that is completely fine, because that is a different experience. But, you know, that doesn't, just because someone's happy in their family, and people feel this expectation, like, oh, I have to be happy, or like, what's wrong with me? Or I feel guilt that I don't feel love for this person. But that experience is what it is, and it exists for a reason. And having that judgmental stance towards it doesn't really help anybody at the end of the day. Because when people are angry or upset, that means they have a lot of unmet needs. Like when a child cries for food, they're crying because their need to be fed has not been met. So when people are upset, when they're sad, when they're humiliated, ashamed, whatever it is, it's signaling that a certain, you know, underlying human need is not being met. And that's completely fine. And the second thing I mentioned was being vulnerable. And I think this goes hand in hand with the first example, but sometimes we're so quick to judge each other. Like we want grace when it comes to our own situations. We want people to understand us, but sometimes people are very quick to pounce on somebody else and what they're experiencing, and quick to, you know, invalidate or question their experiences. And that could be so, again, hurtful. So that keeps people from wanting to, you know, open up and share what they're going through. So I would say those are the two major ones, because humans have a lot of pride just naturally. And in certain cultures, pride is very, very ingrained. The sense of, if we're struggling, we're not going to show you, because we don't want to be seen as inferior or less than. And I know a lot of people feel that way.
You know, thank you for sharing all of that.
Mm-hmm.
One of my mentors in life, she talks about it. And as soon as she said this, it just made sense, because I think I've struggled with similar things that you just mentioned. She goes, you know, Samantha, everyone has their destiny. Everyone has their path.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, if we can all take a step back before we judge someone and just realize, like, okay, like, this is their path that they're going through. It's their story. Like, I'm here to, you know, listen, support, maybe not do that much. You know, you don't have a big responsibility, you know, and that's okay. But just, you know, just be there, depending on, you know, what role they play in your life. But that for me gave me a lot of peace of just, you know, like sometimes things, yeah, you imagine life or you imagine relationships being a certain way, especially, you know, we just came out of the holidays, you know, like you're seeing your family, you're talking to them maybe a bit more, and it's a big shock again, because yeah, everyone's really different. But I think, you know, finding peace with that is so good. And the vulnerability question, I mean, it's a term I reflect on all the time, because I think it's a very big word. And I feel like I'm in a place of privilege to say that I could be vulnerable in XYZ situations. And I acknowledge that privilege, because maybe my financial life is okay. Maybe my job life is okay. Maybe my relationship. So it's like, I acknowledge that life, you know, that not everyone is in those situations. And, you know, just understanding that, you know, vulnerability has a lot of power, like when you can say that. And what you just said about certain cultures, it's true. Like, you're re-engineering a lot of things that you've heard, you know, growing up. And I know for myself, like coming from an immigrant experience, it's true. Like, you would never say that things were like really, really that hard, because you wanted to kind of fit into the dominant culture. So, you know, understanding all of these things, I think, is really important, and having the grace to maybe see it in others, giving them that safe space, I think is good. I just want to thank you. Like, we're having what I call a very courageous conversation. And I really hope that in 2021, people take the time out to have more courageous conversations, and that, you're bringing up a lot of things about the human experience that I think will really help people improve their relationships, improve, their happiness quotient. I mean, for us in Canada still, for many of us, like, we feel maybe that our freedoms are really limited because we're still in a pandemic and we're told to stay home and be in these little places. But it's nice to remember that freedom comes from within. It's not just being able to jump on a plane or go wherever or see whatever. Like, a lot of it, that freedom can come from inside. And a lot of things that you're saying, I think, really helps us as humans to kind of strengthen that. So thank you. And, it goes right into our final question is, like, what tips would you say? How can we manage life better?
How can we manage life better? I think the very first step is tuning in a bit more. Every thought, every feeling we have in our bodies is giving us so much information. And there are a lot of defense mechanisms that people use to protect themselves from having to acknowledge what's happening for them. So, for example, somebody may feel anxious and they go for a drink. Somebody may feel frustrated and they yell at their dog. We always find ways to kind of not pay attention all the time to what's truly happening. Sometimes we project. Sometimes we do things that, we regret. But I think it's so important to tune into what is happening. And I think the second part is honesty. If your partner, for example, leaves you in a place where you're constantly feeling frustrated, tired, sad, exhausted, and when you're interacting with them, but then it's, I have hope for who this person can be. Well, your body, your thoughts are reacting to who they are right now in the present and signaling that there are so many unmet needs within that particular relationship. So in order to get to this place where you could, slowly work towards that well-being, joy, or contentment, you may have to take a risk. And that risk may look like a conversation, a very uncomfortable conversation. It may look like, then this is extreme, leaving that relationship that isn't working for you. But a lot of times we're fearful to do things that may actually benefit us in the long term. And another thing is self-care, taking care of oneself. And this can happen in any way. Self-care is not an isolated incident that happens on a Saturday night. So it could be in very small ways. When you're on your ride to work, play your favorite songs. When it comes to cooking, eat something that you enjoy. It's okay to place boundaries within people. If you don't feel like going out, within this context, we can't really, but if there is a person who drains your energy, allow yourself to say, can we talk another time? So it's finding little ways to, prioritize one sense of, well-being, joy, or contentment. But this is considering so many different aspects. So it is a constant, reassessing and reevaluating, and also very action-oriented way of moving through life. Of course, always easier said than done. And that's why there are therapists if people get stuck. But those are the two major ways that I feel that someone can start on that path.
I love that. Thank you so much. In such a short time, you gave such a toolkit of just how to, recharge our lives. I want to thank you so much, Nereah, for just being so open and honest and humble. This is the type of interview that someone can listen to over and over again and just like take another nugget, you explain things so beautifully. I have so much to reflect on now, on what you said, and I'm really looking forward to putting more of these things into practice. And And, I want to, again, shine the light on you and your organization. So it's called Catharsis Therapy. In the show notes, I'm going to put their website. So if you're interested in speaking with Nereah, she is here. She also has a partner in her practice too. So there's two of them there, and they do excellent work. I imagine you're taking people outside of Ottawa too. You're working remotely.
Yeah, so I work, I could take anyone in Ontario, actually.
That's wonderful. Good. Well, our show goes across Canada. So if you're in the Ontario area, please do consider Nereah to help you jumpstart your 2021. And I look forward to many more conversations with you. I'm so happy. I want to say thank you to all our listeners and to the Green Beaver Company for partnering with us for the show. I'm going to leave a 25% off promo code in the show notes so people can shop green and take care of themselves. Another way for self-care. And thank you so much again, Nereah, for shining the light on such an important topic, how to be happy and just reclaim our lives. What a perfect conversation as we start the new year. Take care.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome.